So the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE just came out, and I guess we have to go ahead and compare it against the original kind of FE, the S20 FE. I know it's not the original one, but the original FE kind of thing, whatever. Now the Galaxy S21 FE is going for a little bit more expensive than the S20 FE currently. So if you have an S20 FE, do keep in mind it is a little bit cheaper to buy right now. So I will leave both of these phones linked down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now these two phones are really more similar than not. You would honestly be surprised how similar both of these devices are. Now on the front, the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE has a Super AMOLED 120Hz panel. It's 1080p, and it was a pretty decent panel when it first came out. There were other things about this phone that kind of weirded me out, but this is still a pretty good panel. I don't think it's ugly. I think it's, held up extremely well. Fingerprint sensor in the display, 120Hz. It doesn't really get too much better than this. Of course, it was a 1440p panel that would be better, but this is still a really decent panel for sure, even in now compared to all the other 120Hz panels that we have. Now, in the S21 FE, on the other hand, we do have a little bit smaller 6.4-inch dynamic AMOLED display. This is also 1080p, and it also has 120Hz. Now, one thing visibly on the front you can see is that the S20 FE kind of looked more like a Galaxy Note, a little bit more sharper edges. The S21 FE actually comes with a little bit more rounded corners, which I actually do like. It looks way more like an S21 FE than the, S20 FE in my opinion. It looks more like the S21, not the S21 FE. It is the S21 FE. So I do like the front, of the S21 FE, but the S20 FE still looks pretty good. I really don't even think it's a crazy big difference. However, there is one area where the S20 FE kind of wins. It's in terms of I/O. So they both have USB Type-C ports on the bottom, but the Galaxy S20 FE actually has a microSD card slot on this device. The S21 FE actually doesn't have this capability, and that's kind of the biggest disadvantage here. I would have loved to have seen that, type of selection on the S21 FE. Unfortunately, we do not have it there, but it is what it is. What are we going to do about it? There's nothing we can do about it now, but that would have been really cool had that phone brought it. Now, the other thing that is really interesting is that they both have plastic backs on the back of these devices. With the S21 FE, it's expected, the S21 had, a plastic back, so it makes sense. But at that time when the S20 FE came out, I thought it was going to be a glass back, but because the Note 20 also had a plastic back, it was kind of expected too. So they both have plastic backs, they both have wireless charging and reverse wireless charging, and there is a little bit of a difference in the way they look. So with the S20 FE, it looks way more like the S20. The S21 FE looks a lot more like the S21, which in my opinion looks so much visibly better. When you are comparing both of them and you're looking at both of them side by side, the S21 FE looks like a much better phone in my opinion than the Galaxy S20 FE. Now, it's not a crazy big deal, but it is something to keep in mind. I'm sure you want a better looking phone, and with the S21 FE, it is a better looking phone than the S20 FE, but it is the newer one and it also costs a lot more money. So in terms of that covers it up there. Now let's go and hit on the camera setup. So they both have triple camera setups on the back, and they're almost the same exact thing. So they have a 12 megapixel wide angle lens, 8 megapixel telephoto lens, then a 12 megapixel ultra wide sensor, and they both have 32 megapixel wide angle lenses on the front. Now here's the thing about these cameras. Luckily, they both can do 4K at 60 on the front, which is really cool, and they can do 4K at 60 on the back. No 8K on either one of these, but like I mentioned, that's totally okay. And here's pretty much the main thing I would tell you about these cameras. They are way more similar than not. They're almost identically the same camera. They have the same type of lenses for the most part. I would probably edge, that the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is probably the better camera just because it's a newer one and it's coming off the S21 and it's probably being based off that somehow. But I really don't think there's going to be that big of a difference. And when you compare the S20 against the S21, there wasn't really that big of a difference in that camera setup either. And in this case, I think it cycles down here. Now, luckily, they both are supported with software right now, so they're still going to be getting software supports and those awesome camera features that Samsung is going to be putting in on future versions of software. They're still going to be supported here too. So I think without a doubt, if you're planning on buying a phone right now, I'd probably sway to the S21 FE. I'd probably say that that's probably the better camera here, but I still think the S20 FE has a really good camera, and you can't really go wrong with that specific lens either. So in terms of that covers it up there. Now in terms of software and longevity, this is another interesting thing between these two phones. A big thing to keep in mind, the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE is probably not going to last as long as the Galaxy S21. That's kind of a given. The S21 FE is a newer phone, but the S21 FE isn't probably going to last as long as some of you may think. It looks like this phone may actually end up getting drop support the same time as the S21. So that's another big deal to keep in mind as well. When you're getting a phone like the S21 FE, even though it just came out, you're pretty much going to be in a situation where maybe it doesn't last as long as some other phones. So keep that in mind, but ultimately that kind of covers it up here as well. Now, another thing to keep in mind is with the performance. So with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we have that newer Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 chipset inside of it with 6GB of RAM on the base model, and it does go up to 8GB of RAM. With the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE, we actually had that Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 chipset, and we also have 6GB of RAM on the base model, and it does go up to 8GB of RAM. Now, here's the thing about these specific phones. They are both very, very good performing phones for sure. I don't really think there's going to be that big of a difference when it comes down to either, size of the performance or anything. But as I've mentioned, and I've said this a lot of times, when you have a phone like the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE, you are still getting a very powerful and very good performing phone. You are not going to feel like you have a slow performing phone or anything like that. So when it comes down to that, you are getting a solid performing device for sure with the S20 FE. Now, on the other hand, with something like the Galaxy S21 FE, this is the best performing phone you can get between these two. I mean, it's definitely a very solid performing phone, for sure. But it's not like you're going to go ahead and get a phone that's like completely outdated or anything like that. Both these phones are very powerful. They have a lot of capability. And without a doubt, if you're planning on buying either one of these phones, you cannot go wrong with something like the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. However, if you still own a Samsung Galaxy S20 FE, I would highly recommend you keeping that too. Like I said, you can't really go wrong with either one of these, and for a light task or for more intensive apps, they're both going to be doing extremely, extremely well in terms of that. So when it comes down to that specific situation, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is still my go-to to recommend to people if you're in the situation for like a performance standpoint, but I think the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE is still a very good performing phone too. Now, ending it off with the battery life, they both actually have somewhat the same size batteries. As far as I know, they're both 4500 mAh batteries. They both have wireless charging and reverse wireless charging, like I mentioned. And this is another big thing to keep in mind with these phones. You actually have a very solid performing chipset inside of them, and you also have very solid performing just performance inside of them too. So as I mentioned, when you have a phone like this, the battery life is going to be pretty decent. Because it's such a big size battery, this thing is going to be lasting for quite a bit of time. And I think that's a massive thing to keep in mind as well. So in my opinion, when you have a phone like the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE or the S21 FE, you are getting pretty solid performance on both sides. So in my opinion, that's a big thing to keep in mind. But on top of that, when you have something like the Galaxy S21 FE, it is a newer battery, it is a newer phone, so it's probably going to get you better battery life at the end of the day too. So that's another pretty big thing to keep in mind as well. So in terms of that covers it up there. And to be completely honest, when it comes down to both of these, I think the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE is a really good value, and if you have it still, I would probably recommend you just to keep it. I wouldn't recommend going through and actually updating or really anything like that. I think when you have a phone like the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, this is going to be the top of the top. This is going to be one of the best phones you can buy in that standpoint. And as I mentioned before, that is one of the better things for sure. Unfortunately, with something like the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE, you're going to be in a situation where it may not last as long as something like the S21 FE, but it's still a very good phone, and I have just massive respect for this device as well. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.